Charles Worthington had everything a man could want: money, power, and a mansion that could fit 100 people inside. But inside that mansion, there was a deep silence. His daughter, Emily, once full of life and light, hadn't smiled in 2 years. She used to be a dancer, graceful and free, but after the accident, she was paralyzed from the waist down. Now, she sat quietly in her wheelchair, staring out of windows or at the walls. Nothing seemed to bring her joy anymore. Not books, not gifts, not even her father's time, which was already rare. Charles was a busy man, always flying to meetings, shaking hands with world leaders, or speaking at fancy events, but at home, he was just a distant father who didn't know how to reach his own daughter. He told himself he was doing his best by giving her the best care, the best nurses, the best house, but deep inside, he knew something was missing. He didn't know how to talk to her anymore, and the guilt was growing. One morning, a new driver arrived at the gate. His name was Marcus Young, polite and quiet. He wore a clean uniform, had sharp eyes, and spoke with respect. He was black, which didn't matter to Charles at first. But some of the older staff raised their eyebrows. Charles ignored them. He only cared that Marcus followed orders, drove carefully, and kept quiet. Marcus came from a rough part of the city. He had grown up surrounded by crime and poverty, but had never given up. He worked hard, stayed honest, and now he had a job in one of the richest homes in the country. To him, this was more than a job. It was a chance to start fresh. He was grateful, and he showed it by being early, professional, and calm the first day. Marcus saw Emily for just a few seconds. She was being wheeled through the hallway by a nurse, her face blank, her eyes distant. He said a soft good morning, but she didn't respond. Still, he smiled and made a note to try again the next time, every morning. Marcus saw her being brought to the garden or the piano room. She never looked up, never spoke, just sat in silence. But Marcus noticed small things: how she slightly turned her head when she heard music, or how her fingers twitched when birds chirped outside. He realized there was still something alive in her. She wasn't lost, just locked inside herself. One day, Marcus was cleaning the car when he heard soft crying. It was Emily, alone near the fountain. The nurse had gone inside, maybe to get tea. Marcus froze. Should he say something? Would she be angry if he spoke? After a pause, he walked over and stood a few feet away. "I don't mean to bother you, miss," he said gently, "but if I had a fountain like this growing up, I'd have danced around it every day." Emily blinked, surprised by his words. She didn't reply, but she also didn't turn away. Marcus took that as a small win. The next morning, Marcus played music softly in the car as he cleaned. Old jazz tunes, warm and smooth, filled the air. Emily passed by in her wheelchair and paused for a second. Her eyes flicked toward the music, then away. Marcus saw it, smiled, and said, "Music like this makes the day feel less heavy, don't you think?" Still, she said nothing, but she didn't roll away immediately either. This became a quiet habit. Marcus would play music, hum along, and speak little things when she passed by. Not too much, not too loud, just enough to leave a mark. Day by day, something started to shift. Emily's eyes looked a little more alive, her posture a little less tired. The house staff started to notice. "Miss Emily looked up today," one maid said, surprised. "Was that a smile I saw?" Another asked, whispering. No one could understand it, except one maid who didn't like change. She started watching Marcus more closely. Jealousy burned quietly in her heart. How could a simple driver reach the girl when no one else could? But Marcus wasn't trying to be a hero. He didn't want attention or praise. He just saw a girl who needed light, and he knew what darkness felt like. He'd grown up with it, lived through it. Now, if he could offer just a little warmth, he would. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Emily wheeled herself to the garden without asking the nurse. Marcus was there, cleaning the car windows again. This time, he didn't speak. He just started dancing slowly to the rhythm of a soft jazz song. His feet tapped gently on the stone path. His arms swayed like the breeze. Emily stared. Then something impossible happened. Her lips curled slightly. A small smile, delicate and unsure, but real. Marcus saw it, but didn't stop dancing inside the house. Charles passed the window and saw the scene. He stopped in his tracks, frowning. Why was his driver dancing for his daughter? Why was his daughter smiling? He stood there, confused and silent. And in that moment, everything in their lives began to shift, not with a loud crash, but with quiet footsteps. Slow music and a simple, warm smile. The billionaire had no idea this was only the beginning. Something bigger was coming, something that would change all of them forever. And it had started with a driver, a wheelchair, and one quiet garden afternoon. The morning sun was soft and the wind was gentle when Emily asked the nurse something unusual. She wanted to go outside, into the garden, not just near the window. This shocked the nurse because Emily hadn't shown interest in the outside world for a long time, but she didn't question it, just smiled and nodded. She wheeled Emily out to the wide stone path near the rose bushes and left her there for a while. Saying she would return with a blanket, Marcus was nearby, polishing the black car as usual. He looked up and saw Emily sitting in the sunlight, quiet as always, but today something was different. There was a tiny sparkle in her eyes as she looked. Up at the sky, she blinked slowly, watching birds fly across the blue above. Marcus felt something in his chest, a pull. He checked to see if anyone else was around. No one, just trees and silence. Then he walked over slowly, phone in hand. Music. Already playing softly. Mind if I play something? He asked gently. Emily said nothing, but she didn't say no either, so he took that as permission. He placed the phone on the edge of the bench. Near her wheelchair, a smooth old jazz tune floated through the garden air. Then Marcus did something unexpected. He began to dance. Not wild dancing, just light steps, careful turns, playful movements. Like a man who loved music and forgot the world for a moment. He twirled once and tapped his feet gently against the stone path. He moved his shoulders with the beat and gave a silly little bow at the end. Emily watched him silently at first, her face unreadable. Then, slowly, her lips twitched. Her eyes followed his movements like a child watching something magical. A small sound came from her throat, a giggle, soft and broken, but real. Marcus looked up, surprised. He paused his dancing, stepped closer, and smiled. That was supposed to make you laugh, he said. Wiping pretend sweat from his forehead, Emily said nothing. But the smile on her face stayed a little longer this time. What they didn't know was that someone else had seen it. Behind the tall window of the mansion, Charles Worthington stood still. He had been walking toward his office when the dancing outside caught his eye. He saw Marcus spinning and laughing softly, and he saw something that made his heart skip. Emily was smiling. Charles didn't know how to feel at first. Confusion. Why was the driver dancing like a fool in front of his daughter? Then anger. Was this man mocking her? But that anger slowly melted when he saw the look on Emily's face. She wasn't being mocked. She was happy. It had been so long since Charles saw that expression. He felt a strange lump in his throat, one he hadn't felt in years. Still, he didn't step outside. He just stood behind the glass and watched, his hands tightly clenched. He didn't know what to think. His heart said one thing, but his pride said another. Inside the house, one of the maids watched from a corner. She noticed her boss watching too, and her face darkened. She had never liked Marcus. To her, he didn't belong in a place like this. He was too free, too relaxed, too close to the family. And now he was dancing in front of the young miss as if they were old friends. She whispered to another maid. Later that day, did you see that driver dancing for the girl? It looked strange. Too familiar, and just like that, the first seed of gossip was planted. Small whispers began to travel through the mansion halls. At first, they were just curious. Then they turned cold. But outside, in the garden, none of that mattered. Emily asked the nurse the next day to be taken outside again. And again, Marcus was there with his music. This time, she asked with her eyes tilting her head just a little toward the phone. Marcus grinned. Same tune. She nodded slightly, and so he danced again, every time, just for a minute or two. Nothing too big, but enough to bring that spark to Emily's eyes. Each time, her smile lasted a little longer. Each time, her hand tapped her wheelchair arm softly. With the rhythm, the garden became their little secret stage. No one else understood it, but something special was growing there. It wasn't about love or romance. It was about life. It was about a girl who had given up, slowly finding color again, and a man who had nothing, giving her the only thing he could enjoy. Charles continued to watch from the window whenever he could. Sometimes from his study, sometimes from the hallway. He never stepped out, never interrupted. But inside, something was slowly changing. He had spent so much time trying to heal Emily with doctors, money, and gifts. But maybe what she needed wasn't any of that. Maybe what she needed was just to feel like herself again. The next few days, Charles became quieter in the house, more thoughtful. He kept thinking of Marcus dancing, of Emily smiling. It stayed with him like a picture, burned into his mind, but he also felt something else worry. What if people started talking? What if someone misunderstood this closeness? He couldn't afford scandal, not now, not ever. So while Emily looked forward to every morning, while Marcus polished the car and danced like the world wasn't watching, and while the birds chirped happily in the garden, a storm quietly started to build behind the mansion walls. And soon, nothing would be the same again. The garden became a quiet place of magic. Each morning, Emily asked to go outside, and the nurses followed her request without asking too many questions. They were simply happy to see her alive, again smiling, laughing even. Something they thought was gone forever. Marcus was always there, waiting nearby, not pushing, not forcing anything. He would play his music softly, move gently, and share small stories about his past or about silly things in the news. Emily didn't speak much, but her eyes said everything. They sparkled, danced, and sometimes even rolled playfully when Marcus joked. It was a fragile kind of joy, something light and delicate, like a candle flame in the wind. But in the quiet halls of the mansion, not everyone saw it that way. The maid who had seen Marcus dancing never let go of that image. To her, it wasn't right. A driver acting like a friend, a servant making the daughter laugh. She believed in rules, in lines that should never be crossed, and she thought Marcus had crossed them. One day, she went to the butler and whispered, "Have you noticed the driver spending too much time with the young miss?" The butler frowned. "He's just being kind." But the maid didn't stop there. She told others too, planting little thoughts in their minds. "The girl is laughing too much," she said once. "That's not natural, not for someone like her." It didn't take long before whispers grew louder. Small groups of staff talked behind kitchen doors or in the laundry room. No one had proof of anything wrong. But gossip didn't need proof, it only needed doubt. Soon, one of the guards mentioned something to Charles. "Sir," he said carefully, "your driver seems overly friendly with your daughter." Charles's jaw tightened. He didn't reply at first, but those words stayed in his mind like a heavy stone. That night, he sat in his study, watching an old video of Emily dancing. She was twirling on a stage full of light and energy. Her legs moved so beautifully, so freely before the accident. The video ended, and Charles just sat there, silent. He realized something. He had tried everything to help her walk again, doctors, surgeries, therapies, machines, but nothing brought her spirit back. Now a simple driver had brought her joy, and it made him feel both grateful and afraid of losing control, afraid of what people might say, afraid that this friendship might bring shame or trouble to his name. The next morning, Charles asked Marcus to come to his private office. Marcus entered, calm as always. Charles didn't smile, didn't even look up at first. He finally spoke after a long silence. "You've been spending a lot of time with my daughter." Marcus nodded slowly, "Only when she wants me to." Sir Charles leaned forward, voice firm. "You are her driver, not her friend." Marcus looked him in the eye, respectful but steady. "I understand, sir, but she's been happier lately." "I've only tried to help." Charles didn't raise his voice, but the warning was clear. "You will keep it professional from now on," he said. "No dancing, no laughing, no games." Marcus gave a short nod. "Yes, sir," and left. Quietly, outside the door, he let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He felt something heavy in his chest, not fear, but sadness. He wasn't trying to be more than what he was. He only wanted to help Emily feel alive again. But maybe, in a house like this, even kindness could look dangerous. That afternoon, Marcus stayed silent. He didn't dance in the garden, didn't play any music. Emily noticed right away. She waited, then looked up at him and said softly, "Did my father talk to you?" It was the first time she had spoken in front of him like that. Marcus smiled gently. "He just wants what's best for you." But Emily wasn't fooled. She turned her wheelchair around and said nothing more, back inside. She found her father and asked, "Did you tell Marcus to stop being nice to me?" Charles looked at her with surprise. Her voice was sharp, full of emotion. He had forgotten how strong she used to be. "I just want you to be careful," he said. "He's a worker, not family." Emily stared at him, then said, "He's more of a person than half the people in this house." Her words cut deep, and she turned away before he could say more. That night, Charles sat alone again. He stared at his reflection in the glass window. He had given his daughter everything except freedom, except connection. He thought he was protecting her. But maybe he was just building a golden cage. In his heart, he knew Marcus meant no harm. But still, his fear of judgment, of public talk, of crossing lines, it was strong. He had built his life on control, and now things felt like they were slipping. Marcus, meanwhile, stood outside under the stars. He thought about leaving the job. Maybe that was better. But then he remembered the sound of Emily's laugh. He remembered the spark in her eyes. He couldn't walk away, not yet, because deep inside, he knew Emily was still dancing, even if only in her heart. And if there was still music in her soul, he would be there to protect it. No matter what the whisper said, no matter who tried to stop it, something real was growing on. It wasn't over yet. It was just beginning. Even if the world didn't understand it, even if the man behind the big glass window wasn't ready to see it yet. The garden felt colder now, even when the sun was shining. Marcus still came every day, but the music had stopped. He no longer danced, no longer joked. He followed orders, spoke only when needed, and stayed in his place. Emily noticed the difference immediately. She didn't laugh anymore, and her eyes began to lose that special light. She would stare into the distance, silent and still, just like she used to before Marcus came into her life. But something inside her had changed. She had felt joy again, even if just for a little. While she had felt like herself, not just a girl in a wheelchair, and now she wanted it back. One afternoon, she asked Marcus quietly, "Will you show me again?" He looked confused. "Show you what?" She gave him a look, not angry, not sad, just a small, hopeful look. "Dance," she whispered. "Just a little." Marcus hesitated, looking around. He still remembered Mr. Worthington's warning, but then he saw her face, so tired, so empty, and he couldn't ignore it, so he looked at his phone, tapped the screen, and let the music play softly. Just one song, nothing loud, nothing wild. He stepped back and moved slowly, just his hands, his shoulders, his feet tapping gently. Emily watched, and her lips curved into the smallest smile. Then something surprising happened. Emily lifted, her arms slowly copying his movements, not perfect, not smooth, but with feeling. Her fingers moved like they remembered the rhythm. Her body swayed in the chair. Just a little. Marcus stopped, amazed. "You want to dance too?" he asked. Emily nodded. "I can't stand, but I can still move." That day, something new began. Marcus started coming early, and they would meet in the garden quietly. He brought a portable speaker and different songs each time together. They practiced, not standing, not walking, but dancing with the chair. Emily learned to spin in her wheelchair, to move her arms in beautiful patterns. She smiled more now, even laughed again. Marcus became her dance partner, her coach, her friend. He never treated her like she was broken. He treated her like a dancer, like someone strong. And that made all the difference. They didn't tell anyone. It was their secret. Something pure, something free. Emily didn't want her father to stop it again. She knew he didn't understand. Not yet. They practiced in the back corner of the garden where no one watched. Marcus marked spots on the stone path with small chalk lines. Emily followed them with her wheels, learning every turn and gesture. At first, she was clumsy, bumping into flower pots and laughing. But after days of practice, her movements became smoother, more confident. She felt powerful, like she was taking back something that had been stolen from her. And Marcus watched her grow with quiet pride. One morning, while they were dancing too, a slow, beautiful song, Charles walked outside with his morning tea. He wasn't planning to check on them, but something made him stop. From a distance, he saw them, Marcus guiding Emily gently, both of them moving in perfect rhythm. Emily spun in her chair and raised her arms, her face glowing with joy. Charles froze behind a tree, watching with wide eyes. He didn't understand what he was seeing at first, but slowly he realized his daughter was dancing. Not like before, not with legs, but with life. With heart, with music. She looked alive, more alive than she had been in years. And the man beside her, the driver he had once warned, was the one who brought it out of her. Charles felt something stir in his chest, something warm and painful. He stepped back, not wanting them to see him. He returned to the house without saying a word, but his hands were shaking. That evening, he sat alone in the library. He thought about everything: the accident, the hospital visits, the doctors who said she'd never dance again. He had believed them. He had given up on that part of her. But Marcus hadn't. Marcus had looked past the wheelchair, past the silence, and found the dancer still living inside his daughter. For the first time in years, Charles cried. Not from sadness, but from something else. Something like hope. He didn't tell anyone what he saw. Not yet, but in his heart, he began to wonder. He'd been wrong about Marcus. The next morning, Emily and Marcus met again in the garden. They didn't know they had been seen. They just laughed, danced, and practiced again and again. Marcus taught her how to tell a story with her arms. Emily showed him how to match her spins with the music. It wasn't just dancing anymore. It was something bigger, something beautiful. They had no idea what was coming. That soon, Emily would ask to show the world what she had learned. That their secret dance would become something unforgettable. But for now, in the quiet corner of the garden, there was only music, only laughter, and two people who believed that even broken things can still shine. The sun was bright, and the garden flowers were in full bloom. Emily moved smoothly through the stone path in her wheelchair. Marcus walked beside her, holding the speaker in one hand and a small bag in the other. Today was special. They were going to practice something new, something bigger, something bold. Marcus had an idea. let's try a routine, he said. A real one, with a beginning, middle, and end. Emily tilted her head. Curious? A performance? She asked, unsure. Yes. Marcus smiled, like a dance story, not just steps. Emily looked down at her legs for a second, the wheels below her hands. Then she looked back at Marcus and nodded. She was ready for the next 2 weeks. They practiced every morning in secret. Marcus brought music that told a story. With soft parts and strong beats, he helped Emily choreograph movements with her hands, her arms, and her chair. She learned how to turn fast, spin, move backward, and forward with feeling. They even practiced moments where Marcus would move around her like a dance between earth and sky. The garden became their stage. The wind clapped with the trees, and the birds became their audience. They laughed when Emily crashed into a bush. They cheered when she spun without missing the beat. For the first time in years, Emily felt like she was building something, not just surviving, but creating. One evening, as Charles sat in his grand dining room, his assistant walked in holding an invitation. "Sir," she said, "we received this from the National Spinal Research Foundation." Charles took the envelope and read it. They were hosting a charity gala in 2 weeks, and they wanted Charles to host it at his mansion. The theme? Hope in motion. It was perfect for his image. Respectable, meaningful, emotional. He agreed immediately. Emily heard about it the next day and sat silently for a moment. Then she turned to Marcus and said, something that surprised even him. "I want to perform our dance," she whispered. At the gala, Marcus blinked. "Are you sure?" Emily nodded slowly. "I want to show them I'm not broken, not a statue in a chair." He looked at her, heart full of pride. "Then let's make it unforgettable," he said. They worked harder than ever. Marcus brought a long cloth ribbon that Emily could hold and wave like fire through the air. He timed their moves to the music, exactly every beat, every pause, every spin. Emily's arms moved like wings, and her eyes began to glow like they once did. She wasn't just dancing. She was telling her story without words, without fear. Finally, the night before the gala, Emily gathered her courage and went to her father. He was sitting in the study, looking over seating plans and speeches. "I want to dance," she said, loud and clear. Charles looked up, surprised. "At the gala," she added. "I want to perform with Marcus." The silence was sharp. Charles sat still, lips tight. "You want to perform in front of everyone?" "Yes," Emily said. "I've practiced. I'm ready." But Charles didn't smile. Instead, his voice became low, worried that might embarrass you, he said. "People may not understand. Coup. Fall, they might laugh." Emily's hands tightened around the sides of her wheelchair. "No," she said firmly. "You're the one who doesn't understand." Charles stood, his voice rising slightly. "I'm trying to protect you." Emily looked straight at him, her voice calm but strong. "You're not. You're protecting yourself, your image." Charles froze. He'd never heard her speak like this, so brave, so sure. Tears began to build in her eyes. "You say you love me, but you're ashamed of what I've become," she whispered. "I'm not ashamed of you," Charles said softly, but Emily was already turning her chair around. "You don't have to be proud of me," she said, "but you won't stop me." That night, Charles sat alone in his room. He watched the old video again, Emily spinning on a stage before the accident. He paused the video and stared at her, smile frozen on screen. Was he really ashamed or just scared? He didn't know anymore. The next day, Marcus arrived for work but was stopped at the gate. One of the guards handed him a letter. He opened it, and his heart sank. It was a formal release. Charles had dismissed him. No warning, no meeting. Just one signature at the bottom. Marcus stood there for a long time. He wanted to fight it, to argue, but he knew Charles was too powerful. He left quietly, not wanting to cause trouble for Emily, but his heart broke as he walked away from the house, from the garden, from her, when Emily found out. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she simply went into her room and locked the door. She didn't speak to anyone, not even the nurse who brought her meals. She stared at the ceiling for hours. Her hands still, her ribbon unused. The mansion grew silent again. The staff noticed her quiet return to sadness. But no one dared say anything to Charles, not even when they saw him staring out the window. Toward the garden, where once his daughter smiled, the gala was just a few days away. Lights were being set up, flowers delivered, tables placed across the lawn. Guests were sending their confirmations. Everything looked perfect from the outside, but inside, nothing felt right. Emily sat in her room alone. Marcus sat in a small apartment in the city, staring at the empty corner where he used to practice, and Charles sat in his office, unsure. If he had done the right thing, he had silenced the music. But somehow, the silence was louder than ever before. The night of the gala arrived, and the Worthington mansion sparkled like a castle. Golden lights hung from trees, music floated in the air, and famous guests walked across the red carpet with glasses of wine in their hands. Every table was decorated with white roses and silver plates. People were laughing, smiling, taking photos. It was a night of celebration, but for Emily, it felt like a prison. She sat quietly in her room upstairs, dressed in a soft blue gown her nurse had picked out. Her ribbon lay on the table beside her, untouched. Her hair was done, her face was calm. But her heart felt hollow. She had dreamed of this night of dancing under the stars, of showing the world that she still had light inside her. But Marcus was gone. Her father had removed the one person who had helped her feel alive again. Downstairs, Charles was shaking hands, giving smiles, and listening to speeches about strength and recovery. He stood with other rich donors, nodding as doctors spoke about spinal research and future hope. But every few minutes, he looked toward the stairs. Something in him felt wrong, like a missing beat in a song. Emily hadn't come down, and he knew why. At the edge of the ballroom, a young violinist played soft music. The stage was set for the final performance. The crowd didn't know what it would be. It was kept a surprise. But there was no one backstage, no plan anymore. Emily was supposed to dance, and now no one would. Suddenly, a soft gasp moved through the crowd. The music paused for a moment as eyes turned toward the far end of the ballroom. Emily was there, rolling her chair onto the wooden stage. She moved slowly, but her back was straight, her face calm. Charles's heart skipped. He stepped forward, unsure, but then he stopped, frozen. Behind her, coming from the side curtain, was Marcus. He walked calmly, holding the speaker in one hand. He wore a black suit, not a driver's uniform. The crowd whispered, confused, curious. But Emily didn't stop, and neither did Marcus. He placed the speaker on the stage floor and pressed play. A soft, powerful melody filled the room. Then, without a word, the two of them began to dance. Emily moved her chair gracefully in small circles, her hands lifted like wings, her ribbon flowing through the air. Marcus moved around her, guiding, matching her rhythm. He didn't touch her. He'd followed her lead. She was the star now, and he was just the shadow moving in time. The audience fell silent. No forks moved, no glasses clinked. Only music and movement, only emotion. The story they told with their dance was clear. Even without words, a girl trapped, a spirit broken. And then hope, freedom, strength. The ribbon flew like fire. Her arms moved like waves. Marcus lifted his arms with hers, stepped back as she spun, and caught the rhythm like it was magic. Some guests had tears in their eyes. Others sat with mouths open, completely still. No one expected this. Not from a girl in a wheelchair, and not from her former driver. Charles stood frozen, watching his daughter. She looked like the Emily from before. No, stronger than that. She was no longer broken. She was burning with life. And then he clapped, a slow clap at first, unsure, then louder, and then others joined him. Soon the ballroom was filled with standing applause. People shouted, "Bravo!" and "Amazing!" Emily bowed slightly, her hand over her heart. Marcus simply smiled and nodded, then stepped back, giving her the full moment. Charles pushed through the crowd, tears in his eyes. He reached the stage just as Emily was about to leave. "Emily," he said, voice trembling. She looked at him, unsure of what he'd say. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. Then he turned to Marcus, "And I'm sorry." The crowd watched, moved, and curious. Charles looked at Marcus again. "You did what I couldn't," he said. "You gave her back her light." Marcus looked surprised, then simply nodded. "I just helped her find what was already inside," he said softly, after the performance. Emily was surrounded by people. Guests came to congratulate her, to take photos, to say how inspired they were. But through it all, her eyes followed Marcus. And when the room finally grew quiet, she rolled over to him and said, "Thank you for coming back." He smiled. "I never really left." That night, something new began. Not just for Emily, but for Charles, for Marcus, and for everyone who saw what courage looked like. Not in standing, but in dancing without limits. The next morning, Emily's story was all over the news. Videos of the performance went viral. People from all over the world sent messages cheering her bravery, her beauty, her spirit, and through it all, one truth became clear. It wasn't just a dance. It was a message that no matter what life takes from you, it can never steal your fire. And the person who helped her remember that was a man. No one expected, a man who once held her door open and ended up opening her entire world. The next morning, the Worthington mansion felt different. The same golden sunlight poured through the windows, but something had changed inside. The staff walked with a lighter step. The air was full of quiet excitement. Everyone had seen the performance, whether from the ballroom or later through the video that had now gone viral. Emily Worthington was no longer just the quiet girl in the wheelchair. She was now known as the girl who danced again. Marcus arrived early, not as a driver. This time, he wore a simple shirt, jeans, and carried a notebook filled with ideas. He was invited and not stopped at the gate, not treated like a stranger. The same guard who once handed him a dismissal letter now greeted him with a respectful nod. In the kitchen, the chef whispered to a maid, "He's back," and the maid, who had once gossiped about him, now said softly, "Good." Even she had been touched by the dance. Her heart, like many others, had quietly changed. Charles sat in the sunroom, reading the newspaper. The front page showed a large photo of Emily. Arms raised, ribbon in hand, Marcus beside her. He smiled. As he read the headline, "A dance that changed everything," his heart felt lighter than it had in years. When Marcus walked in, Charles stood up. "Welcome back," he said quietly, not as a driver this time, but as part of the family. Marcus was stunned, but managed a grateful smile. "Thank you, sir," he said, "but the real hero is Emily." Emily entered moments later, dressed casually, her hair in a braid. She looked fresh, full of energy. Something about her face had changed. She had confidence now, not just in her dancing, but in herself. She smiled when she saw Marcus and rolled up to him quickly. "You ready to get back to work?" she asked, teasing. "Always," he replied, holding up the notebook. "I brought new ideas." From that day on, the mansion was no longer just a house of silence and sadness. It became a place full of movement and sound. Emily and Marcus turned the large garden into their dance studio. Sometimes staff would pause their work to watch from a distance. They even clapped when Emily nailed a new spin or move. Soon, messages started arriving from around the world. Other families with Disabled children wrote to Emily, saying she had given them hope. Young girls in wheelchairs sent her drawings and letters. One message read, "Because of you, I want to dance again." Another said, "My daughter smiled for the first time in months after watching your video." Charles saw all of this, and something inside him began to truly heal. He had always believed money could fix everything, but now he understood healing comes from connection, not control. He started attending Emily's rehearsals quietly. He didn't interrupt, didn't direct. He just watched, sometimes clapping softly, other times wiping away tears. One day, Emily wheeled over to her father during a break. "Why didn't you ever dance with me before?" she asked gently. Charles looked surprised, then smiled awkwardly. "I never knew how," he said. "And I was scared to look foolish." Emily took his hand and placed it on her shoulder. "Then let's look foolish together," she said. And there, on the garden path, Marcus taught Charles his first steps. They all laughed when Charles tripped slightly, but it was the kind of laughter that brought them closer. Later that week, Charles made a big decision. He announced that he would be launching a new foundation with Emily. A center for disabled dancers where movement and expression would be celebrated. No matter the body, he named it Emily's Light, and he asked Marcus to be the head instructor. The press went wild. People across the country donated, volunteered, and sent stories of their own. Emily was asked to speak at schools, hospitals, and even on TV. Everywhere she went, she spoke with honesty. "I'm not special," she would say. "I just refuse to stay silent." Marcus stood beside her during interviews. Always quiet, always supportive. When asked why he helped her, he replied, "I just saw someone who still had music in her soul." Their story became more than just a viral video. It became a movement. One that taught people that true beauty isn't in walking perfectly, it's in living bravely. But even with all the fame, Emily stayed grounded. She still danced in the garden, still laughed with Marcus, still had quiet moments with her father. One afternoon, she was reading letters from young fans when Charles walked in holding something. It was an old box, dusty but carefully kept. He placed it on her lap. Emily opened it slowly, and inside were her childhood ballet shoes, tiny, soft, and pink. Worn down by years of practice, she touched them gently and looked up. "I kept them," Charles said. "I just didn't know if you ever wanted to see them again." Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled. "They remind me of who I was," she said, "and who I still am." The next day, she placed those tiny shoes on a shelf in her room, right beside a photo of her and Marcus, taken the night of the gala. It was more than just a memory. It was a reminder of how far she had come and how much further she would go. The world now saw Emily as a symbol of courage, but to her father and Marcus, she was something even more. She was the girl who refused to be broken, the girl who taught them all how to dance again, not with steps, but with heart. The morning sun poured gently through Emily's window. She sat in front of her mirror, brushing her hair slowly. She looked at herself, not the wheelchair, not the old scars, but her eyes, her face, her smile. Today was her birthday. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like hiding. She didn't feel like pretending to be strong, because now she truly was strong. Not just in her body, but in her heart. Downstairs, the staff moved busily, decorating the garden with flowers and lights. Charles had planned a small birthday celebration, not with hundreds of guests like the old days. This time, it was going to be personal, real, and full of meaning. Marcus arrived just after breakfast, carrying a large gift bag and his usual smile. Emily lit up as soon as she saw him. "You're late," she teased. "I'm fashionably late." He replied, laughing, "And this time, I brought backup." Behind him came 3 young dancers from Emily's Light, each one in a wheelchair, each one glowing with excitement. They had come to perform something special for the girl who made them believe in dreams again. Charles was standing in the garden, watching as chairs were arranged in a half circle. He wore a light suit and held something small in his hand. Wrapped in soft red cloth, he kept glancing at it, as if unsure whether to give it or not. Emily was wheeled into the garden just before noon. Her nurse placed a flower crown gently on her head. Everyone clapped quietly as she entered. The three young dancers rolled forward and took their places. Then the music began. The performance was simple but magical. The dancers moved in perfect rhythm, their arms flowing, their faces glowing with emotion. It was a gift to Emily. But it also reminded everyone watching what courage really looked like. Marcus watched proudly from the side, tears in his eyes. He had trained them, guided them, but this performance came from their hearts when the final note played. Emily clapped with all her strength, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You were amazing," she told them, "all of you." The girls rolled over and hugged her one by one. "You made us believe we could do it," one of them whispered. After the dancers left the stage area, Charles stepped forward slowly. He looked at his daughter, then at Marcus, and finally held out the small red-wrapped object. "I've been waiting to give you this," he said, voice shaky but full of warmth. Emily opened the cloth slowly. Inside was a pair of pink ballet slippers, a little worn but carefully. Cleaned her childhood shoes, the same ones she had once worn before the accident. The same ones she had thought were lost forever. "I saved them," Charles said. "I didn't know if I should, but they're yours, always have been." Emily stared at them, unable to speak. She ran her fingers gently across the fabric, remembering the dance studio, the music, her dreams. Then she looked up at her father. "I thought you wanted me to forget all that," she said softly. Charles took a deep breath. "I was wrong," he said. "I wanted to protect you, but you didn't need protection. You needed belief." He knelt beside her wheelchair, something he had never done before. "You didn't just survive, Emily," he whispered. "You became something more, stronger than I ever imagined. You're my daughter and my hero." Emily leaned forward and hugged him tightly. The crowd clapped again. And this time, it wasn't just polite, it was full of emotion. Later, as the sun began to set, Marcus walked with Emily around the garden path. They moved slowly, enjoying the quiet moments. "Do you think things will ever go back to how they were?" Emily asked suddenly. Marcus looked at her, then shook his head gently. "No," he said. "And that's the best part." Emily smiled. "Yeah," she whispered. "I don't want the old days anymore." She looked up at the sky, painted in orange and gold. "I want new ones. Better ones." Marcus stopped walking and turned to her. "Then let's start today," he said. "What do you want to do next?" Emily thought for a moment, then grinned. "I want to choreograph a show with dancers like me and dancers like you." He raised an eyebrow. "You mean me dancing?" "Yes," she laughed. "You're not escaping that easily." They laughed together, the sound rising into the open sky. Behind them, Charles stood at a distance, watching. But this time, he wasn't worried or afraid. He was proud. He had once thought power came from money. But now he understood true power came from something else. From love, from belief, and from letting go of fear. That night, Emily placed her old ballet slippers on a special shelf beside her bed, next to them. She placed her ribbon, the one she had used in the gala dance. Both items were pieces of her, one from the past, one from the present, together. They told her full story. Before falling asleep, she looked out her window at the moon. She whispered quietly, "Thank you, Marcus." And in a quiet room across the hall, Marcus whispered back, "Thank you, Emily," because in truth, they had saved each other. Not with miracles, not with magic, but with small steps, shared smiles, and a dance that lit the world.